So we start here at the opening. When we first come into the building, one of the first things you see is this "Every Person, Every Time" poster. And it's actually hand-signed by each of our employees. A couple of years ago, we really looked at the mission of the organization and said, okay, what does this really mean? And at the heart of what we do is every person, the patient, the family, our colleagues, every time. What is it that they need? How do we answer that now? And we really just made a commitment that this is what our focus is going to be. And we went around the state and our employees signed it all over this. And we hung it up, first thing you see when you come in the building. This building that we're in is really special, and I like to stop here because it actually shows the original drawing of when the residents of Arbor Hospice was here. And this was the original place that that program and the board and the donors from this community supported an actual residence that was here for several years. Just before the affiliation, they decided, because of several changes in reimbursement, we needed to find a new home for the residents, and it has now since moved to Saline. But because this is such a beautiful property, it means so much to the community, and it's a property that was owned by the organization. When the affiliation happened, we actually turned this into our home office, and this is our office for the entire state. You can see down here are also some of the pictures of the residents that moved to Saline, so that we still keep that special residence, and it's still something that's highlighted throughout the state. I mean, to have a community to be able to have a residence for hospice care is a really big deal, and we're very proud of that. This is actually a favorite stop here. This really shows our We Honor Veterans program, and you'll see on the side here we have employees and volunteers who also served our country, and then also you can see on here Dr. Paletta is also highlighted. He serves as our Chief Medical Officer, but he also served in Operation Desert Storm, and he heads up our We Honor Veterans program, which is twofold. It's ceremonial and it's also educational. So years ago, the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization put together what's called the We Honor Veterans program. And they did that because 1 out of every dying hospice patient is a veteran. 1 out of every 5 is a veteran. And we realized that there needed to be something more done for our patients that are veterans. So first, on the education side, there are many issues that come up at end of life, especially for those that served in the military. And we needed to be able to train our nurses, our social workers, chaplains in how to specifically care for those veteran patients. There were times where we would have a veteran patient who was underneath their bed, and the staff was asking the question, what's going on? What is this? And they were really reliving some of the things from their military experience, and so they needed to be able to address how to handle that with patients and families. And so there's an entire training program, and based on which war someone served in, there's specific things that we need to know about that we help our staff to do. But then on the ceremonial side, it's really beautiful. We have pinning ceremonies where we actually, whether it's one-on-one with an individual patient who may be at their home or sometimes in a nursing home, we will pin them and share what branch of the service they were in, anything notable about their service, and then pin them and thank them for their service. And I always tell employees that if you get the chance at one of your teams, if they are doing a pinning ceremony, just go. Because it really truly will be one of the most moving things you've ever seen. And I specifically remember one that I went to where there was many World War II vets, but there was also one Vietnam veteran who was there. And when we got done, he just had tears streaming down his face. And he said, nobody's ever thanked me for my service. And that story has come up as we start to see more and more Vietnam vets that are on our program. And I know it's meaningful for them, but it's meaningful for their family too, to have that service recognized. A couple of years ago, we put this up here, and it really is meant to show the entire NorthStar Care community. And how we came up with this was, we actually roll back several years into our history. 26 years ago, in 1994, several Hospice of Michigan offices came together, and they were known by their local names in their communities, and they formed Hospice of Michigan. And then fast forward several years later, we had the affiliation with Arbor Hospice, which was a community-based hospice here in Ann Arbor. And when we came together, we wanted to still be able to recognize the names of both of these programs because they have such great legacy in their communities. But then it started to dawn on us that we really needed some sort of overarching name that combined them together. At the same time that we affiliated, we started to have some of our triage services. We sold them to other hospices, other not-for-profits across the country, and we needed a name that showed that we all go together, and so that's when we came up with NorthStar Care Community. So first and foremost, it's the services of Hospice of Michigan and Arbor Hospice. These other really important services include our Joelle and Nyman Anchors programs for children, which obviously includes our Children's Hospice program and our Compass program. Also, the NorthStar Palliative Care, which is really a program of palliative care that we are spreading across the state, and then the NorthStar Institute, which is research and education for the organization. And then lastly, the NorthStar Solutions Group, which is the group that we sell these services to other hospices across the country with the goal of preserving and promoting the not-for-profit Michigan mission. All of these things combined, they include the NorthStar Care Community, and how we came up with that is really, at the end of the day, families are in need of navigating through this time of end of life, and all of these programs and services really are that kind of that North Star of helping families get through this and navigating this tough time. This is my favorite wall. I love this because it represents the people who were the pioneers of our combined organization. So first and foremost, let's start out. Maggie Allisey, she gave a gift now in the early 2000s, and her whole goal was, how do you keep quality of life, especially at end of life? She came from a family of people who lived really long lives, and she was really intent on making sure that all of our patients and families had the best quality at end of life. Her gift turned into what is now known as the NorthStar Institute, which represents all of our education, community outreach, and research in the community. Next on here, just below her, is June Hammersma. I had the privilege of working with June for many years. And when we talked a little bit about Hospice of Michigan first formed in 1994, she was the inspiration behind putting together the foundation. And it was her idea that really at the end of the day, all healthcare is local and all giving is local. And so that always translated into our hospice program. I mean, the nurses who served our patients in Ludington or Grand Rapids or Detroit or Alpena lived and worked in that community, and then they provided care to our patients there. And she wanted to make sure that everybody knew that anybody who made a gift in memory of a loved one or a gift to Hospice of Michigan, that gift was used in that local community. They didn't even have to say it. It was just automatically known that if a gift came from a community, it was used there. And as we have grown and as other hospices have affiliated with us, we've kept that same philosophy, and the foundation today still really holds that dear. Next on here is Jim and Gail Fauner. Dr. Fauner was actually the founder of our pediatric hospice program, which now is called the Joelle and Nyman Anchors program for children, because it encompasses not only pediatric hospice, but our Compass program, which is care a little bit before a family needs hospice care, and our perinatal program. But he really, the story behind this is that he's an oncologist by trade at Helen DeVos Children's Hospital. And he had gone a couple of years where he was able to cure between 75 and 80% of the children that came in to see him that had cancer diagnosis. But there was still 20% of the children that the cure was not possible. And he said, I can't sit across the table one more time from a mother and a father and say, there isn't something else I have for your child. And one day he actually called Hospice of Michigan and said, I want a partner. We need to be able to have hospice care for children, and it needs to be provided by a dedicated pediatric team. And that was really the birth of this pediatric program, and now it's grown to serve the entire state. And we even consult with our hospices up in the UP when need be, when we have a child who needs it. Right below it is Joelle and Nyman, and she's the one who made that gift, or made a gift that we were able to take this West Michigan pediatric hospice program and expand it throughout the entire state. And that was a really big deal. And her famous quote was, it doesn't matter why, if a child needs hospice care, it shouldn't matter where they live, they need dedicated pediatric hospice care as well. And so her gift allowed us to spread that program throughout the state. Next on here is really to represent the pioneers in Arbor Hospice. First is Mary Lindquist. Mary was the founder of Arbor Hospice's program, And she was known for being the one who had the vision that that was needed right here in this community. And Mary she had lived and breathed hospice care and really helped get it started here. And the way I like to describe Judy Dow-Rumelhart is that Judy helped make it into reality and made it very sustainable. Judy was a doer. She helped to get the residents started here, but she's the one who helped make this stuff sustain it very well. The last one on this wall, but the newest addition, is Larry and Dolores Boss. This also is someone that I've worked with closely now for 23 years, a beautiful hospice family, served as the chair of our board for years. When Larry's wife, Dolores, died unexpectedly a few years ago, he decided to make $1 million gift to start the Dolores Boss Caregiver Support Fund. And for us, this is a game changer. We know the difference we make for the patient, but we also know that sometimes the biggest impact we can have is on the caregiver themselves. And our Caregiver Support Fund helps things like grief support for the family after the death and even before the death. It helps with our 24/7 call center where caregivers can call in day or night to get help for their loved one. It helps with quality of life, which is huge. It's a major aspect of what we do. And then any of our social work services that are really important for families to help keep families intact throughout this difficult journey. This is the point in the tour where I usually ask, okay, who can tell me what bridge that this is? And usually I have a couple of guesses, and finally somebody does pick. It is the Ambassador Bridge. And then I ask people, okay, why would a hospice organization take an entire wall and paint the Ambassador Bridge on it? And usually some of our orientees will say something like, well, maybe it's bridging, it's coming together of different people, maybe it's helping to cross troubled waters, different things like that. And this actually is a really important but also tender story. Several years ago, we heard the story from one of our social workers on our Detroit team, and they told us a story where one day they got called to one of the inner city Detroit hospitals, and there was a patient there who had been diagnosed and needed hospice care. Our social worker came in and they started talking about different care options, and it was discovered that this gentleman was homeless. And so our social worker said, very appropriately, hey, we have nursing homes, we have other places where we have beds, we would be able to take care of you there, and so that you could die in the comfort of one of these residents that we have. And the patient stopped her in her tracks right then, and he said, you know what, this is my home, I live underneath the Ambassador Bridge, it's where I live, it's where my community is, and if you can't take care of me there, then I don't need your services. And it was one of those moments, I think, for our social worker, and I give her a ton of credit because she got it. She got it. She knew that when we say wherever a patient calls home, we really do mean wherever a patient calls home. And she said, okay, we're gonna make this work. And they decided, they signed the patient on. He did go home back to live underneath that bridge. And we just, from safety precautions, we would just send our staff out 2 by 2 so that they would go and care for them under that bridge. And one of the things that became very important, and this we heard from our Detroit team all the time, and it's not to say that this happened all the time, but there is a really special protection. In fact, we used to hear them say, the word on the street was, don't mess with our hospice staff, don't mess with the hospice nurse. When they come to care for her, there was almost like an extra protection around them. And the reason why we share this story is that open access is a really important aspect of hospice care, in this hospice program in particular. And it means we accept everyone regardless of their age, their diagnosis, or their ability to pay. And this case, this story that I just shared with you really represents many of those aspects of this program. As a not-for-profit hospice, we can't do the work that we do without the support of our donors, and we were really pleased that a couple of years ago we were able to put our first combined donor recognition wall together, and you'll see on here names from years and years, all the way going back to the original Hospice of Michigan and Arbor Hospice, all of the folks who have given gifts of $50,000 or more, and those who have left us in their estates, their gifts are listed here. And when we say as a not-for-profit, that's what makes us different. There are a host of programs, things like the pediatric program, like our institute, like palliative care, like grief support, that would not happen without the support of donors. So another one of these, what is a picture of the San Francisco Bay doing at a hospice office? When we were putting this tour together, we actually asked the directors of each of our programs to be able to come up with what is the visual representation of your program that you'd like to share. And at the time, our director of palliative care picked this, and there's a beautiful story behind it. Apparently, the way the San Francisco Bay was discovered was years ago. A sailor got into terrible fog and was literally here and could not tell where he was, and basically had to just say, I give, and just kind of let go of the reins, so to speak. And he drifted into the San Francisco Bay throughout the night and through the fog, and when he woke up in the morning, he saw this gorgeous bay, San Francisco. And the reason why she wanted to use this picture is that it really does represent palliative care for our patients and families. At Arbor Hospice and Hospice of Michigan, palliative care is community-based and it's hospice-based, which means that it really is palliative care for those that are getting towards end-of-life care. This is not palliative care for chronic illness, for surgeries or things like that. This really is meant to be as someone needs care and has pain issues and before they transition to hospice care. And when we say community-based, what that means is there are a lot of palliative care programs in hospitals and even some clinics, but there are very few places, and in fact, none in Michigan, where the actual palliative care team follows the patient home. And because we're a hospice who is in patients' homes, we're naturally set up for this. And so that really is the foundation and basis of our palliative program. One further illustration to this in the Bay is that when the director was thinking about her program and this picture, there is a lot of chaos. There's a lot of troubled water that families are going through, especially right before they need hospice care. They have multiple physicians, they're seeing multiple specialists, but there's not one person to help guide them. That is what this represents, it's kind of this busy waters out here and then the calm and peace once you get into the Bay. We talked a little bit earlier about the Joellen Nyman Anchors program for children, and this is really the wall that depicts that whole program. What you see here are children who were on our program. Several years ago, we had a father whose daughter had passed away. He was a professional photographer, and he learned about the program that we have, and he decided as one of his gifts back to a program that really helped his family was he offered that anytime we had a child who came onto our hospice program, he would take their photograph, blow it up, frame it, and give it as a gift to the family. And in 2004, a few years after our program was established, we did a major fundraising and awareness campaign for that program to really help give the fund or have the funds so that the program was really stabilized, and it was a game changer for this program for sure. And so we did an actual art exhibit with all of these photographs and a big campaign in the newspaper, and then we followed it by a major fundraising event that we did in collaboration with the Van Allsburg family with the turning of the book The Polar Express into a movie. That was significant because it raised over $1 million and it provided the funds that helped stabilize this program and make it grow. And today this program I've mentioned is really threefold. The largest percent of our patients are on our hospice program, and it's throughout the entire state by a dedicated pediatric team. And then also we have our perinatal program, which means if a family finds out in utero that their child will have a limited life. Whoever knows, if it's minutes or days, however long that is, we make sure that that family has best quality time with that child. And then our Compass program, which is really kind of navigating, helping that family just before they may need hospice care. This service now, like I said, is provided throughout the entire state, and it really is it's a gift to these families. And nationally, we are recognized and called upon for our expertise in how we care for pediatric patients. This piece here is that it's actually a special memory-making part of the program, which is beautiful. One of our social workers in particular works with families to do these hand molds. Oftentimes it's the patient their siblings, their parents, everyone's hands are in the plaster, and then what comes out, they give as a gift to the family to remember that child. I mentioned earlier that really the foundation for this was a gift, or a partnership with the Van Allsburgs to help us stabilize this pediatric program. We've been really fortunate that that gift has kept on giving in a relationship with both Chris and Lisa Van Allsburg. And most recently, we had 2 more movie premieres with the recent 2 installments of Jumanji. All of those funds go to help this pediatric program. And then something very close to Chris and Lisa, Lisa as an art teacher, and of course Chris as an artist and a writer, we were able to establish the Van Allsburg Pediatric Art Program, which has a volunteer art teacher who does art lessons with each of our kids. And oftentimes those sessions are done with the patient and their siblings and their parents, so it's a time to do something together and actually talk through several of the things that are going on while using art as the basis. This stop here represents the gardens that we have here at the home office, which is beautiful. So remember, this place was a residence first, and we wanted to be able to have gardens available to patients looking out their rooms, but also families, a chance to walk through the gardens and have a time of respite. That continues today, even with the home office being here. The gardens are a space that was donated by Mary Curtis Richards and her family. They continue to support the gardens for us, and it continues to be a community gift. We have people from town come through and walk all the time, and we have several notes here from donors who have said thank you for keeping this so beautiful for us. We also have a group of volunteers from Ford Motor Company that come and help us weed the gardens and keep them beautiful. So it still continues to be a special place, and it connects the legacy of when this was a residence as well. I have to stop saying I love this stop because I could say this about every single one. But this one here is probably our stop that gets the most cell phones that come out and pictures that are taken, whether it's new employees that are coming through or guests that are coming through the building. And I think the reason for that is it's 50 ways to volunteer. Hospices were built on the volunteer aspect of the movement, and still today all hospices must have at least 5% of their care provided by volunteers. This is just the start of the different ways that volunteers can help not only the organization but our patients and families. And it has been pointed out several times that there is a really beautiful reflection here, so that when people walk up and look at it, hopefully what they're thinking is, yes, I can see how I could also volunteer and take part in this. Many times we'll get people who say, oh, I could never do that. I couldn't be a hospice volunteer. That would just be too tough. And I think in their mind, they're thinking of our volunteers who do go to a patient's bedside and provide respite or care for a loved one or a family member that's on the program. But this also shows the ways that we work with our volunteers for whatever it is that they love to do. And sometimes there are things like walking the family dog, or holding a baby while the parents rest, or playing music at a memorial service. These are great examples of things you might not traditionally think of how you can volunteer. Now, more than 25 years ago, we had this Remembrance, Hearts of Remembrance. There is a great group of volunteers who still get together every year. Post-COVID, they come into the office, but they design a different heart each and every year, and then together they make hundreds, if not thousands of them, so that they can be given to families. It's used as a fundraiser for Arbor Hospice's program, but there are several families who have collected these over the years. It's just a special tradition that's done at Arbor Hospice, and we look forward every year to seeing what design the volunteers will come up with, and then every fall a letter is sent out to our families asking if they'd like to purchase one, and all of the proceeds go to support our open access program. One special aspect of this, because of our We Honor Veterans program, it was recognized by our volunteers that they would make an additional special heart for those patients who served in the military, and there was a Remembrance heart focused specifically on veterans. stand in this part of the hallway to represent all of the complementary therapies for the organization. And I should say this is actually a real gift that we received from Arbor Hospice through the affiliation. They had been doing complementary therapies for a long time, and they really helped us to spread that to more communities throughout the state. First and foremost is our music therapy program, which is absolutely beautiful. The songs that are represented here are the 8 most requested songs that we get for our patients and families. But at the end of the day, it really truly is therapy. It's music therapy. These are certified and trained music therapists who work with our patients and families, and they're able to help bring out many things, whether it's a young teenage patient to a 90-year-old patient. Sometimes when our music therapist is working with a patient, sometimes it's for a family, we'll say, that's the first time I've heard my mom's voice, especially with dementia patients as they sing along to the music. So there's just many really beautiful things that come from our music therapy program. Over here is our pet program, and that's done all by volunteers. The pets that we have are trained, and they work with our patients and families and do pet visits, which is also a great aspect of volunteering for the organization. And last but not least is our massage therapy program, which it's hard to really represent that, but it's a beautiful program, very highly requested of our patients and families. And one of the stories I love about this is I remember one of the massage therapists telling me this story that there was a patient who we knew was getting very close to the end. And the massage therapist asked the family and the caregivers, as I'm giving this patient a massage, is it okay if I say it's all right to let go? And the family said, yes, of course. And sometimes that's what our patients just need, is for someone to say, you know, your family said it's okay. And as they massage them, they slipped from this world and died such a peaceful death. So I do know that this has really been a saving grace to many patients and their families. This corner right here represents our grief support corner, and I love this because grief support really is meant to provide comfort to a family. So 13 months after the death of a loved one, we provide a very rich and deep grief support program, which means we do one-on-one counseling, we do group sessions, anything that's needed for that family. But what's also really important and special about our grief support program is sometimes our grief support managers are called in before the patient's death. Obviously, in hospice care, there's a lot of little losses that happen, and oftentimes our grief managers can really help a family through that, not only the patient, but the family experience some of those losses and what they mean so that they are better prepared for the death of that loved one. And you can see there's many things here, including some bookmarks and some recommended books that they can do, that they can share with patients and families to really help ease that time. And if a family needs more than 13 months, we provide that as well. As a not-for-profit hospice, we know that this is something that is totally funded through philanthropy. Grief support is a requirement, but that doesn't mean that all hospices provide equal grief support. And many times people just send a brochure, call that grief support, and we know that that's not what patients and families need. They need, many more of them need more in-depth grief support at the end of life. This aspect here, I just wanted to point out this picture. This was actually done in a group session with a lot of children who had lost a parent. And this picture shows depicting what I look at like on the outside and what I feel like on the inside. And the grief counselor was able to help this child walk through what some of those feelings were. And this is very typical and can happen. And just the ability and the expertise of those grief managers to be able to walk that child, or in any case, any of our bereaved, through that process really is something special. This is a map of our service area, and you can see we depicted on here is the Hospice of Michigan and Arbor Hospice offices. But what is important to know is that with every one of these sites that's located here, all of our staff drive within about an hour driving distance, and that's really our coverage area. In some of the areas where we have gaps and there are services that are needed, either there are other hospice providers or we partner with other hospices, particularly in the case of pediatric patients, so that we can care for them through some of these areas and we don't have to say no to anyone who needs our care. One of the legacies of Arbor Hospice is the quilts that are part of this. Mary Lindquist, who I mentioned earlier, was the founder of Arbor Hospice, and she still to this day owns a quilting store. But this has been something very special. Volunteers have handmade quilts for patients and families for years and years. This is one of the most intricate ones from the early days at Arbor Hospice. But what was also special is that every patient, when they left the residence after they had passed away, is that their body was, they had a quilt that was laid over the body as it was taken out of the residence. And so this has always just played a special part, so we wanted to pick some of the few that really highlighted the beauty of not only volunteering, but showing that special care and attention to patients and families. Keeping along the Arbor legacy, this quilt behind me actually is a very special quilt. When the campaign to raise the funds for the new Arbor residence, which is the building that we're in today, when that was first done, there was a quilt that was made, and every single one of the major donors that contributed towards that campaign hand signed this. And so if you get up close, you can actually see the names of all of the people who contributed to making this place a residence for Arbor Hospice patients and families. As I mentioned earlier, Maggie LSE gave a gift to start the Maggie LSE Center for Quality of Life, which is now known as the NorthStar Institute. And it's very special for a hospice to have an institute like we have. I think at last check, there were only 13 hospices in the entire country out of 4,000 that had a dedicated program to research, education, and community outreach. And so that's what this place is here. This room represents a training lab, but the institute is much bigger than that. It's training for the over 400 clinicians that we have that are providing care to our patients and families each and every day. And so there are things like orientation that we do, especially for new clinicians, checks out in the community as maybe some skills that maybe a nurse that they need to learn while they're out in the field. And so our institute staff helps us to provide all of that education to our clinicians. But in addition, after we train our own staff, we really feel it's our responsibility as a not-for-profit to share that knowledge out into our communities. And currently we're undergoing 2 major studies, one for caregiver burnout, especially as it relates to hospice workers that the Institute is driving. And also we did a program, we were testing how we take care of children further upstream. That was also funded through a major grant that the Institute helped with as well. What this wheel represents is the care team and, well, of course, the patient and family in the center of it. So we just really simply wanted to be able to depict that at the center of our care, obviously, is the patient and the family, and then all the different people, parts of the interdisciplinary team that surround it. And one of the things that is so special, as we know about hospice care, is that the patient's in the center and the staff come to the patient. Whether it's the physician, the nurse, the social worker, chaplain, grief support person, volunteer person, they all surround that patient and family. And one thing I always want people to know is that when every single week we have what's called the IDT team, which is the interdisciplinary team meeting. And what happens at that meeting is everyone that surrounds that patient sits around the table and goes through one case at a time. And if your loved one is on your program, that person's name comes up and the physician says, here's what I saw on my last visit. The nurse will say, this is what I saw. There's a certain pain that's going on. I'm not sure how to resolve it. The social worker can say, here's some of the things that I'm finding at my last visit. And together, they can work through most of those issues that are going on. So it's just a really beautiful way that all the different people that are placing their hands to care for that patient get together and talk about each case individually.